and they called the doctor and found that the doctor thought that I had diabetes, which of course later proved that I did not, but I was very sick. And friends and neighbors and farmers brought things in for me to eat, plenty of eggs and peaches. I love canned peaches, and they brought those, and I was certainly well fed and then I began to recover towards spring. Just about that time, my little sister became very ill, and the doctor correctly diagnosed hers as rheumatic fever, which of course ran into heart trouble, which was very dangerous, especially at that time, because there was no cure for it. My dad's sister, Kitty, Aunt Kitty, heard of our terrible condition, and she wrote saying that her husband, George Wharton, had taken charge of a concession at Walbridge Park in Toledo, Ohio. If we would move there, he would give Dad work, and also Clayton, who was about 17 years old and had quit school. By that time, Edith Jeanette was in a critical state, and she passed away 3 weeks after we moved to Toledo. It was June 17, 1905. She died of heart trouble. In the spring of 1909, Aunt Agnes died, leaving no will. Mother came to her share of the estate. By today's standards, her windfall of $3,000 is not very big, but in those days and in our need, it was certainly a godsend. My parents decided to buy a house with the money. They thought a small town would be best. As Mother had liked Grand Haven area so much, they planned on moving to nearby Spring Lake. Ruth was married by that time. Clayton had joined the Navy. Catherine was living with Aunt Catherine, so I was the only one at home. As the season at Walbridge Park would last till Labor Day, my father stayed there to work till it closed. Mother and I took the train in August to Spring Lake. She inquired about a house to buy, and we heard of a new house no one had ever lived in. The man who was a builder was retired. His wife died, and he was lonely. So he decided to build this house to keep himself occupied. It was very well built, 4 bedrooms, parlor, living room, dining room, and kitchen, full basement. He sold it to my mother for $1,800 cash. There was no electricity in the house and no gas, because the town had not brought in the gas yet. Later they did, and Mother installed gas, and we got a gas range, but we never did have electricity. Also, we had no bathroom. However, at $1,800, it was a bargain. I was 13 at the time. Catherine and our dad came later. Catherine and I enjoyed that town through our teenage years. Lots of friends, though there was no radio or TV. They would all meet at our house and sing, with Catherine playing the piano, and we'd play games and have fun. I can hear the teenagers of this year saying Dullsville, or whatever is the word at this time, but we enjoyed life. My father worked for a while at Story and Clark Piano Company in Grand Haven, but he tired of working, so he quit. He planted and cared for a garden in our big lot. It helped with the food, but it did not pay the bills, so eventually my mother lost her house. We joined the Baptist church. That is, my parents and I. I was baptized there on one stormy night, and as I was down in the water ready to be immersed, the lightning put out the lights. Someone lit an oil lamp, and I was baptized. Catherine attended the Presbyterian church and sang in the choir. The rest of us also attended the Presbyterian church evenings on Sunday because the Baptist church had no evening services. Ruth and her husband had separated, and she came home to live with us in Spring Lake, but she would never go to church at all. While we were living in Toledo, Clayton became a problem to my folks. He would not work or go to school. The minister got him a job in a factory, but he would pretend to go to work, but he would sneak off and roam around. He might be gone a few days at a time. Finally, my mother got a card from him saying he had enlisted in the Navy at Grand Rapids, Michigan. She was very upset, but I was glad because he was not pleasant around home. He was joined to the fleet, which was going around the world. As there was no Panama Canal at that time, the ship sailed around the Horn of South America and up the coast of California. There, young Clayton thought he had had enough, and he jumped ship and disappeared. More trouble for Mother. Dad, though I don't think Dad worried much. A while later, I don't know just how long, Clayton came home with a buddy he had picked up along the way. A few days later, he was gone, and when we got the paper at night, it told of a man being held up by two young men. Clayton had given a fictitious name, but my mother knew who it was. She went down the next morning to the courthouse and talked to the prosecuting attorney and told him that Clayton was AWOL from the Navy. So they sent him back there, and he served the rest of his enlistment on a prison ship. I think it was Portsmouth, New Hampshire. About this time, the pastor of our Baptist church left and took a church at Fenton, Michigan. They invited me to come down to visit them, and after I was there a day or two, they suggested that I take a job in the store there and spend the winter with them. They knew the manager of the variety store, so I went to work there. After Christmas, I was laid off and returned to Spring Lake. My dad had had what he thought was a bright idea. He had had many before, which never turned out well. He bought a small island in Grand River near Spring Lake. It had a lot of spiles surrounding it, which had anchored a dock at one time. He thought if they were taken out and cut up for lumber, it would be very profitable. He paid $75 for the island. There was $75, by the way. And then he found out that those spiles were useless. When I came home from Fenton, it was winter and no money coming in. No jobs for me there. The Lord must have intervened because Dad found a man who would buy the island from him, so he got his $75 back. I took advantage of it and begged my mother to use some of it to get me down to Grand Rapids, where I could get a job. Ruth had already left and was working there, and Catherine, though she was working in a store at Grand Haven, would come down too. She was earning only about $4 a week. My mother agreed to come down to Grand Rapids, and she came with me to help me find a place to live and to work. I went to work for a doctor whose maid was on vacation just a week, but when she came back, they let me stay there a few days while I looked for another job. I worked 3 weeks for another doctor in their home, but they sure nearly worked me to death. So Ruth suggested we get a room together where we would do our own cooking. So I got a job at Baxter Laundry, mending the sheets. We pooled our money and called Mother and told them to move down here to Grand Rapids, and we would all live with them and pay board, and that would help out. So that is what they did. In April of 1915, they moved here. Catherine, Ruth, and I paid our board, and Bill Seaman, who at that time was Ruth's fiancé, lived with us too. Then my dad got a job as night superintendent of the Murray building. He had to boss a crew of Lithuanian women who cleaned the building at night.